The year was 1888, and the air of Paris, heavy with the scent of jasmine and scandal, shimmered with expectation for the annual Bal des Nuits. Within the gilded halls of the Palais Royal, 1,000 masked faces concealed 1,000 truths. But none were as intricately guarded as that of Lady Isabelle Beaumont. Isabelle, known publicly for her quiet reserve and impeccable lineage, wore a domino mask and a cloak of deep sapphire blue, adopting the temporary alias of Solange. Her true perilous secret lay not in her clothing, but in her ink-stained fingers. She was the notorious, anonymous polemicist Isolde, whose sharp quill regularly challenged the very aristocracy now swirling around her. Her target tonight, however, was not material for an article, but merely a necessary appearance before her watchful aunt Ilara, who sought to marry her off to the highest and dullest title. She slipped away from her aunt's suffocating surveillance and found solace near a window overlooking the Parisian nightscape. The distant murmur of the city a stark contrast to the hollow laughter of the ball. A voice low and resonant as a cello broke her solitude, a voice that carried the inescapable weight of command, yet was softened by a surprising warmth. Solange, the masked man, murmured, extending a hand she knew was gloved. His costume, a severe but elegant black, devoid of the usual aristocratic flash. "You look as if you were preparing for escape, mon ami." "Is the glittering cage too small?" he asked. His posture rigid, but his eyes, the only visible part of him, were intensely kind. Isabelle found herself drawn in by his gravity. He was clearly a man of immense duty, but his soul seemed restless beneath the mask. "Perhaps the bars are too predictable, sir," Isabelle replied, allowing her voice, usually reserved for her most scathing prose, a rare lilt of honesty. He inclined his head in acceptance. "Predictability is a necessary cage for those of us who must protect too much. My name for this single night is Damien." The man was, in fact, Duke Gabriel de Valois, known as the Iron Duke for his unyielding adherence to duty and his control over the National Bank. Gabriel attended the ball only out of political necessity, hating the frivolous display, and had worn the stark black ensemble to remain invisible. He had never spoken so freely to a stranger, yet Solange's directness was a sudden, thrilling liberation from the stultifying court etiquette he was bound to. Isabelle challenged, moving closer, the forbidden nature of the query making her heart pound. Gabriel hesitated, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing his guarded eyes. "A legacy, a family name, a life that is not entirely my own." He then returned the question with a sudden, devastating directness. "And you, Solange? What necessary falsehood does your sapphire cloak hide?" Isabelle felt a cold dread, yet also a powerful need to trust him, the need to speak truths no one wishes to hear, the courage to be seen only when I am hidden. They spent the next hour speaking not of titles or lands, but of philosophy, of the societal barriers of the fin de siècle, and the yearning for authentic living. Gabriel, who spent his days signing decrees and managing vast fortunes, found himself discussing the poetry of Baudelaire and the injustice of the Parisian slums. Isabelle, the fierce journalist, was surprised to find that the man whose class she attacked had such a profound hidden empathy for the common struggle. This masked interaction, free of names and lineage, was the most genuine conversation either of them had experienced in years. Their hands brushed as he led her past a column, and the small electrical shock felt like a seismic shift beneath the marble floors of the palace. The orchestra shifted to a slow, intimate waltz, and Gabriel led her onto the floor, its touch firm and assured, yet surprisingly gentle. They moved as one, a single, dark silhouette, against the kaleidoscope of silks and jewels, their movements dictated only by the music, not by social rule. "When the mask is on, we are only ourselves," Isabelle whispered, looking up at his masked face, committing the exact shade of his eyes to memory. "Then I pray this night never ends," Gabriel confessed, a dangerous sentiment for the Duke of Valois to utter to an unknown woman. As they danced, the music swelled, and Isabelle realized she was falling for the man. Not the title, a man who might very well despise her true identity. The scandal her writing caused was an affront to his world. Her existence as Isolde mocked his adherence to duty. Gabriel, meanwhile, felt his carefully constructed walls of reserve crumbling under the weight of Solange's intoxicating intelligence and passion. He knew he should step away, sever the connection, and return to his political reality, but the pull was magnetic. Suddenly, a drunken marquis stumbled and snagged the tie securing Isabel's mask. The sapphire domino slipped, falling silent on the parquet floor, revealing Lady Isabel Beaumont's breathtaking, vulnerable face. The music seemed to mute in the surrounding crowd. Recognizing the high-born lady, paused their conversation to stare. Gabriel's breath hitched. Isabel Beaumont, the most sought-after debutante in all of Paris. His logical world reasserted itself. He immediately covered her face with his hand, a purely instinctual protective gesture. "A slight accident," he announced to the crowd, his voice regaining its authoritarian duke-like steel, daring anyone to stare. Isabel, mortified, quickly replaced the mask. But the fragile anonymity was shattered, replaced by the crushing weight of their true identities. They retreated hastily from the dance floor, moving towards a secluded winter garden, the scent of frozen roses filling the cold air. "You are Isabel Beaumont," Gabriel stated, removing his own mask, revealing the handsome, stern face of the Duke of Valois. Isabel gasped, stepping back. The Iron Duke, the pillar of the establishment she had spent 2 years railing against in print. "Your Grace," she mumbled, sinking into a curtsy, the intimacy of moments before brutally erased by his title. "I am Damien, just moments ago," he countered, his voice softening once more, conveying a struggle between the Duke and the man. "But the man Damien cannot exist with the knowledge that you are Lady Isabel. My duty demands a certain kind of future, and I am Solange, who cannot exist with the knowledge that you are the Duke," she whispered, her hands trembling around her mask. They stood separated by only a few feet, yet an insurmountable social chasm stretched between them, enforced by titles, duty, and public expectation. "Do not let the mask fall for me again, Isabel." "Not yet," Gabriel pleaded, his aristocratic restraint warring with the desire in his eyes.
8.
That night, they made a silent, dangerous pact to continue meeting in secret, always masked, always as Damien and Solange. To preserve the fragile bubble of their true selves, their meetings began 3 nights later, not at a ball but in the abandoned wing of the Louvre. Under the cold, knowing eyes of stone statues, they shared secrets that the Duke of Valois and Lady Isabel Beaumont would never dare to utter, dreams of freedom, political frustration, and the profound loneliness of duty. Gabriel spoke of the pressure to maintain the family honor, the endless political maneuvering, and his secret desire to be a simple scholar. Isabel spoke of the intoxicating power of the pen, her fear of exposure, and the joy of seeing her words spark real, democratic change. One evening, under the shadow of a forgotten Rubens canvas, Gabriel spoke about a fiercely critical, an anonymous writer named Isolde. Isolde's critiques of the government are often devastatingly accurate. "Solange," he admitted, his jaw tight. "I admire her courage, even as her words threaten everything I must uphold." Isabel's heart plummeted. He admired the courage, but not the woman. The woman was a threat. She said nothing, letting the silence protect her. Then, a week later, Isabel published her most cutting piece yet, a scathing attack on the Duke's latest tax policy. The articles, signed simply Isolde, caused an uproar in the city and placed Gabriel in a political and financial vice. The next night, Gabriel arrived at their meeting place, his mood black, his elegance replaced by a palpable, weary anger. "Isolde is wrecking months of careful negotiation, Solange. She is an agitator, hiding behind anonymity, acting recklessly," he stated, pacing the cold stone floor. Isabel, deeply hurt by his dismissal of her life's work, fought the urge to rip off her mask and confess. "Perhaps the agitator is merely exposing a deep wound that your careful negotiation ignored." "Damien," she retorted, her voice shaking with controlled fury. Their argument was fierce, touching on the very foundations of their opposite worlds, duty versus truth, stability versus change. They parted that night in silence, the emotional distance wider than the Seine River that separated their respective homes. 2 days later, a note arrived for Lady Isabel, handwritten in a firm, recognizable script, unsigned, but bearing the heavy wax seal of the Valois family. The note simply read, The masquerade must end. Midnight. The Hall of Mirrors. Isabel knew this was the end. One of them would have to surrender their identity, or they would have to surrender each other. She arrived at the Hall of Mirrors at midnight, alone, still wearing her sapphire domino mask, but carrying a heavy heart beneath the silk. Gabriel was waiting, standing beneath a massive chandelier that cast a fractured reflection of his severity across the polished floor. He wore no mask now, his duke's uniform immaculate, confirming the end of the game. The Chancellor suspects I have an informer close to my office, Isabel. This Isolde is too precise. The scrutiny is unbearable, he stated, his voice heavy with the weight of state affairs. I cannot risk my position, not now. We must end this foolish romantic indulgence. Isabel stepped closer. The reflection of their two figures meeting in the glass, the Duke in his uniform, and the anonymous woman in her mask. Hey, you asked me to choose duty, Gabriel? But you do not know the full duty I carry, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Taking a deep breath, she slowly reached up and removed the sapphire domino mask. You asked me who I was when I was hidden, Gabriel? The answer is this. I am Lady Isabel Beaumont, and I am Isolde. The confession hung in the vast, silent hall, a shattering crystal against the polished mirrors. Gabriel stood utterly still, his face a complex roadmap of shock, disbelief, and sudden devastating understanding. The truth the woman he loved was the enemy who threatened his carefully constructed world was almost too much to bear. He finally moved, his steps slow and heavy. Isabel. You wrote that article? The one that almost destroyed me. I wrote the truth that will save Paris from an outdated tax, she replied, standing her ground, proud of her creation. But why the masquerade? Why let me fall in love with a fantasy? He asked, his voice raw with betrayal. Because the Duke would never have spoken to the journalist, and the journalist could never have loved the Duke, Isabel explained, tears finally gathering in her eyes. She knew she had lost him. The duty of the Duke would always overpower the passion of the man. Isabel turned to leave, her mission complete. The truth was revealed, and the consequences accepted.
Wait.
Gabriel's voice was sharper now, laced with a new kind of terror, the terror of permanent loss. He took 2 quick strides and caught her arm, spinning her gently back to face him, the vast hall of mirrors capturing their desperate moment. I built my life on duty, on stability, on the cold necessity of order, he confessed, looking not at Lady Isabel, but directly into the eyes of Isolde. But in the silent moments we shared, I felt more real than in all my years as Duke. Your truth, Isolde, even if it threatens my life, is the most beautiful thing I have ever encountered. He released her arm and instead placed his hand on the back of her neck, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. I cannot give up the Duke's duty, and I would never ask you to put down your pen, he said, his voice firm, having found a third dangerous path. But what if the Duke needs the journalist? What if duty, for once, must compromise with passion? He leaned in, his kiss a powerful commitment, sealing the new secret covenant between them. In that moment, the Iron Duke and the anonymous polemicist found their impossible middle ground, bound by a love that was dangerous, forbidden, and utterly true. Their masquerade was over, replaced by a secret alliance far more complex and thrilling than any silk mask could conceal. They would face the pressures of Paris, the threat of exposure, and the censure of their peers, together as 2 parts of an impossible whole. The masquerade of the heart had finally unmasked the truth. True identity must always triumph over imposed duty. For more stories of forbidden romance and historical intrigue, be sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio.